Hey there, my name is Marc Fennell, and yes, welcome to what I'm calling the Zuckocalypse. If you haven't been following the news this week, Mark Zuckerberg had to front up to Washington to explain what exactly Facebook has been doing with everybody's private details, and of course how that was used in the 2016 election. But there's impacts for all of us. And to debate that, we have Tegan Jones, the deputy editor of GIZMODO, and SEAMUS BYRNE, the editor of Science Alert. What did we learn this week?
I'm going to say it was like performance art, basically. There were
very staccato performance art.
An awful lot of Congress people who just wanted to be seen asking questions. Some of them wanted to be seen performing the act of saying, like, hey, you guys just run your business the way you want to run it, you know, blah, blah, blah. There were about half a dozen who actually asked really useful questions, a number of which were well briefed, clearly, by staffers, but then they still didn't know enough to ask follow-up questions that actually got to real answers. Yeah. And that ultimately is my takeaway, was that it was kind of meaningless. And the question is now, will they listen to the response of experts who are pointing out how off-track and meaningless so much of it was, to now go and get to the root of what we actually need to care about, because so much of this was just ridiculous.
One of the things that one of the congressmen brought up was that there isn't really a Bill of Rights or any real protection on Facebook for minors. So Zuckerberg really did a great job of just sort of dodging, answering whether he would support a Bill of Rights for minors under 16, you know, not having targeted ads, unless, of course, their parents consented to it, though I don't know why any parent would consent to that. So I really feel like that's something that needs a little bit more attention.
Talk to me about the strategy. Zuckerberg volunteered to do it. Why, and what do you think they were trying to head off?
I think the two big things were, one, that he was very comfortable saying they would welcome certain kinds of regulation if required.
We like regulation, just the right kind.
And in particular, I think regulation would suit them just fine because they're the monopoly provider, right? Like, as in, it would stifle other companies easily scaling to the level that they've now achieved if the right regulations were in place. Like right now, there's kind of laws being passed in some states in America around facial recognition and how companies like Facebook use it. Facebook has actually actively lobbied against those laws being introduced. So while we have, you know, the Zuckerberg apology tour basically pointing out that, you can introduce these things if you want to, and we'll be okay with that. Apparently they've spent $12 million last year lobbying, to have laws work the way they want them to work. It really comes down to the whole question of the data points. And the second thing I was going to point to was that he's kept coming back to the idea that when people give us their data, they get to choose how that is shared. And that suits them just fine, because the real question is how they collect data that we're not even giving them. Yeah. And that's the stuff that so many of the people asking questions weren't coming back to. That it's one thing to say, when I post a photo, I can say if it's public or if it's friends only. It's another thing entirely when they're just tracking location data and your usage across the entire web that you don't even know they're doing.
Like a real world example is if they're actually targeting people based on what they're talking about in Facebook Messenger. I've personally had this happen.
Everybody.
And really specific things like, talking with some girlfriends about, reproductive stuff, because we're at that age, and then suddenly for the first time within half an hour getting a targeted ad about, conception products and things like that. So that's what I want to see looked into way more.
I still get the occasional wedding dress advert.
And look, I think one of the killers here as well is that the ridiculous part of Zuckerberg's testimony is that multiple times he just danced around, or basically said he didn't know the answers to certain things, like when he was directly asked, is Facebook tracking you when you're logged off Facebook? And he flat out kind of danced around it, pretended he didn't know. He knows. Like, there's no question that he knows how Facebook works. And that is so fundamental to how Facebook works. But he's sitting there kind of going, oh, well, yeah, I'm not really sure about sort of that. And there are all these kind of different elements, even like there's this whole thing of shadow profiles where, even if you have never signed up for Facebook, Facebook knows things about you because through contacts, through all the kind of third-party things, they know lots about you. And again, that was directly brought up by one of the people asking questions. And he tried to play that game of saying, I'm not sure about that. And it's ridiculous that he can keep and try to dance around that and always trying to steer it back to his prepared answers about how you share things and the way that you get to choose exactly how you share things.
So what are the sorts of changes, what are the sorts of rules in an ideal world, Tegan, that you would like to see?
The Facebook business model is completely set up to take advantage of people's apathy. So I really want to see them set it up so you don't have to opt out of what you're sharing your data with or who you're sharing data with, that you have to opt in. But of course, that's probably never going to happen because that's what the business model is based on, and they'll lose money. But I think that they might have to implement something at least similar to that. And I think that can be seen by the fact that for the first time in Congress, Zuckerberg said that there would always be a version of Facebook that's free. Up until now, he's always said Facebook will always be free. So I think he's starting to face the reality that they might have to start looking at different business models and that they're not going to be able to get away with as much anymore.
One of the strongest things that could be done would be to actually enforce limits to how long they can even store these data profiles about people. To, essentially have some kind of, whether it's a rolling, couple of years, whatever, like maybe it's 5 years. But like right now we're at that point where they just have this eternal pool of data that they can keep adding to, that there is no limit to what they're allowed to sort of do with it once you've given them permission.
All right, there's lots more of this in the podcast of Download This Show. It is available right now on all of your good podcasting apps. And also some of the bad ones. We're very equal opportunity in that sense. See you guys.